Hi, everyone. Welcome to this three-part video series entitled Finding the Needle in the Haystack. Hiring salespeople is an art and a science, and this webinar series, or rather video series, is designed to take the agony out of finding and hiring A players. So stay tuned over the next week and a half or so as you will receive invitations to view each segment. We will be building a step-by-step strategy for getting hiring done right the first time. Each episode will be just about 15 minutes in length, easy to get through. So let's get started. That's me. I'm Barbara Spector. Probably everyone here has ever hired someone who didn't work out, particularly a salesperson. And as one of my clients told me, hiring salespeople is about as enjoyable as getting a root canal. Let's figure out why that keeps happening to so many hiring managers. To do that, I'd like to ask you a few questions. First of all, how accurate do you think the typical one-on-one interview is on a scale of 0 to 100%? Think about that. In your mind, I bet you said not more than 30 to 50% accurate. Well, based on SHRM's, the Society for Human Resource Managers studies, they have found that the typical one-on-one interview is not more than 50 to 61% accurate. Next question. On a scale of 1, how important is hiring the right salespeople to you personally and to your company? 10 being most important and 1 not important at all. Everybody that we have ever run this program through always answers it's a 10. It's one of the most important things. So what's wrong with this picture? If the interview process is only 50 to 61% accurate at best, but hiring right is the most important thing you can do to be successful, or for your company to succeed, something's really out of whack, don't you think? Now imagine if your accounting department sent out invoices that were only 51% accurate, or your IT department only wrote code that was 50% accurate, but the rest of it had bugs in it. What would happen to your business? You'd be out of business. So you see, hiring is the most random process in any organization. And when hiring salespeople, that problem is compounded because salespeople are different than the rest of your employees. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, a little bit about me. I've been working in sales for over 3 decades. During that time, I never received a salary. I always worked on straight commission. I lived and breathed everything that your salespeople face and that you face perhaps as sales managers. I know rejection. I know competition. I've dealt with buyers who are liars, and I've been met with more hostility and feeling out of control than you can possibly imagine. I started my own business after years of dealing with employers who believed in the revolving door theory of hiring people. Hire them. If they don't work out, fire them. So I watched countless millions of dollars get flushed down the toilet by hiring managers who hired that way, or that hired by the mirror test. You know that one too. If they're breathing and put fog on a mirror, let's hire them. And they didn't have a clue either how to coach those people that they did hire or how to hold them accountable for results. They didn't know how to retain them either. So after years of frustration working inside corporate America, I decided to open my own firm, and that the focus of my business was to help companies hire, develop, and retain top performers, A players on purpose rather than by accident. So that's our mission. We will be talking about a strategy over the next few sessions to do just that. Before we begin, one more question for you to think about. How many of you love having to constantly refill the seats of salespeople that left? Well, that's a joy. And how many of you love interviewing candidates who turned out to be marginal at best, even though you thought they were going to be superstars? And last but not least, how many of you actually know how much the cost of turnover is costing your company? Most people do not have an answer to that. At best, they'll say to me, oh, it's got to be a lot of money. It's actually in the millions of dollars if you have a decent sized sales force, even one as small as just 10 people, 10 salespeople. The way I know that is because we calculate it. And if you look on the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there's a way to get what we call a cost of ghosts calculator. Just click on that link at the bottom of your screen and you will see it. Most companies don't have a clue how expensive turnover is because there's no line item on a P&L for turnover. It's basically insidious. It's not just, the cost of writing an ad. It's not just the cost of getting cards or equipment for your salespeople. It's your time spent hiring. It's the cost of goodness knows how many deals that get lost because you didn't have the right person in place. It goes on. And that's how it ends up amounting to millions of dollars. Very important thing for you to start to ponder. Imagine if your own salary or your own bonuses were tied directly to your ability to reduce turnover costs at your company. How much better at hiring would you do? Would you get it right? Or would you just keep doing what you're doing currently? I think you'd try to get it right. So this program will help you stop beating your head against the wall, find the needles in the haystack, and save your firm millions of dollars. So here's our agenda over the course of the next few days or the next week and a half or so. We're going to look at what the 6 challenges that salespeople face. We'll talk about that today and how that impacts your ability to interview them. Next, we'll take a look at whether or not the job posting that you have online or on your website is attracting top talent or just C players. We'll talk about that today too. Then we'll move in the next session to how to read a resume right so you don't end up with what we call these days fake news. And we'll also look at why pre-employment assessments that are used by so many companies to hire salespeople actually fall short when it comes to hiring salespeople. And in our last session, we'll talk about the gaps in your interview process and how to fill them in the right way, how to turn that interview actually into an audition. You'll understand that better in session number 3. And last but not least, we'll take a look at how do you onboard people the right way, salespeople the right way. So to begin today, I want to introduce you to a very important concept to measure what we call quality of hire. My good friend and colleague, Lou Adler, who is a nationally acclaimed recruiter and a trainer, I worked for him for a number of years, makes the contention that if you can't measure the quality of hire up front and then throughout the recruiting and hiring process, you can't improve the quality of the people that you're going to hire because it requires metrics every step of the way. It's kind of like that old expression, if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. So quality of hire is actually very easy to measure as long as you know how, as long as you use a scientifically based sales assessment and what we call, and what Lou calls, a performance-based job description, not a standard job description. More on all of that as we go along here. Here's the good news about being able to measure quality of hire accurately. One of the things Lou says is that you can actually eliminate 150% of all hiring mistakes if you measure it, because 1/3 of those mistakes are due to not attracting enough top people. If you just got better at attracting them, 50% would be improved out of that 150% up front, since you need to first see better people to get going. Another 1/3 of the mistakes are due to really bad interviewing skills, and that's due to bias, gut feelings, lack of training on the part of hiring managers, and among other things. And often the person that's hired isn't the best person you interviewed due to all those problems. And lastly, the final 1/3, of course, of that 150% is negotiating the offer and closing the deal on terms that are agreeable to both you and the candidate. So let's first talk about why salespeople are different, and then we'll come back to quality of hire. So let's imagine that we're walking down the street and we just heard about this company and they just hired a new salesperson. So let's walk inside and we'll meet Frank and Bill. Frank's the sales manager who has outlined the job expectation to his new salesperson, Bill. Frank has given him the revenue goals he needs to meet and what he must do in order to succeed. But in order to hit his numbers, Bill has many obstacles and challenges that he needs to overcome in order to succeed. The first of which is competition. So you see, while he's out there pursuing prospects to purchase products from him, other salespeople will be attempting to get the same person to buy from them. Secondly, rejection. Poor Bill, 80% of the time he'll hear no when he tries to make appointments. That's never happened to me, of course. I hate when that happens. The third is hostility. Most decision makers today don't have the time to talk to him on the phone, especially if they don't know him. They'll hang up on Bill. They might sound rude, brushed, irritated, and even downright hostile. The next is lack of control. Because even when Bill has done everything correctly, there's still no guarantee that the prospect's going to buy from him. And next is resistance. Buyers are taking longer than ever to make a decision to buy, and many want a price shop or comparison shop. And lastly is timing. Like most salespeople, Bill is entering the sales cycle later in the buying process because of the internet. Buyers are doing lots of research online ahead of time before ever hearing from him. Now let's walk a little further down the hall and notice that there's Joan, a newly hired office administrator. She too has been given a set of expectations by her manager, and in order to succeed, she must follow guidelines, instructions, and policies. But nobody inside or outside the company will attempt to prevent her from performing her duties. Yeah, the Xerox machine might fail, but it doesn't fight her back and it doesn't bite her back. And usually she'll have a team that can carry some of the weight of her responsibilities. And usually they don't have any authority to say no to her, and there certainly isn't going to be any competition that she needs to overcome. So you see, when it comes to salespeople, it takes a special individual to persevere in the face of adversity. Would you know how to recognize that person? That's what our goal is, to help you begin to understand today. Well, let's go back to quality of hire. When I was working with Lou, he always talked about the person has to have ability, they have to have fit with the job, motivation has to be that squared, and that'll give you a result. So when he would talk to recruiters or hiring managers, he'd say, would you at least see a candidate if he or she had a track record of doing work that was comparable to what you need done? They always would say, of course. And then he'd say, well, you have to define the work you need done before you can see a person who has a comparable track record. And they'd kind of agree to that. And then I'd say, well, what if the person's trainable and coachable and they can in real time solve job-related problems with a track record of making similar decisions to what you need done? Would you see a person if they had those 2 criteria or 4 criteria? And they basically all would say sure. And then I asked, what if the person has the achiever pattern? The achiever pattern indicates the person has been in the top half, third, or quartile of their peer group for the bulk of their career and has a track record of growing responsibility and growing impact. And they said, oh yeah, we've probably hired that person. And then he said, well, we're not done yet, but we're certainly in the game. Let's add another criteria. We call it ramp-up speed. Okay. What if you could know how quickly the person would ramp up and start selling, just like the people you need? They'd say, wow, that would be great. We'd hire that person. I said, well, we're not done yet. I want to ask another question before that. It's obvious if this person has done all of those things right, they should have the basic skills and experience and education needed to do the job and to do it right. Yes? They say, of course. But he would add, and this is critical, quite frankly, their skills and experience will probably be different than what you have listed on your job description. In fact, there will be a lot of people you wouldn't even see if you filtered them based on your job description. So they pondered that, said, yeah, you're probably right. So the first step we have to do is to eliminate skill based, experience based job descriptions and define real job requirements as a series of performance objectives and competency to measure all of that criteria. And they buy into that as a concept. Then he said, but we're really not ready to hire the person. The person has to fit with the company culture, the pace, and the resources that are available, maybe even the politics, and for sure they should fit with your management style, right? And they say, yep. Number two, the candidate has to see the work as intrinsically motivating. If a person doesn't want to do the work required and doesn't have a burning desire to be successful, the person won't go out of their way to do it, at least at a peak performance level. They're not committed enough to do whatever it takes, and they agree to that. And lastly, wouldn't you want someone who is looking for a career move and career growth rather than just a job? And if you get all those things right, this is what it might look like. You're going to measure quality of hire, and we can do this on a 1 to 5 scale. Our 1 to 5 scale says, hey, level 1 is a bottom third person. We tend to hire people like that because we conducted a superficial interview. We were biased. We were just checking boxes. Those folks have very few, they might even fit our salary requirements. They were hungry for the job, and we conducted a quick assessment of them. Level 2 is a person who's qualified in skills and experience, but generally doesn't fit, doesn't meet all the other criteria. But we hire people like that anyway if we're doing box checking and just behavioral interviewing alone. So we don't want to be looking at these folks. What we want to suggest is that you go after level 3 people. Why? Because these are top third people. They can do all the performance requirements in the job and get at least a 3 or better on all the criteria. That's a really good hire. Not average, really good. Because level 4 is a top 15 to 20% person. They're awesome, but you better give them a level 4 job or they'll leave. And a top 5% hire is a world-class star. But again, if you don't give them a level 5 job, they'll leave. And if you do, they'll probably end up being your boss in 2 to 3 years. So that's the ranking system. And if you rank all those factors on a 1 to 5 scale, add them up, now you've measured pre-hire quality of hire. And you can read more about that in Lou's book entitled The Hiring Machine. A level 4 is not necessary, and level 5 is not necessary. And the beauty of this is you can also use these same factors to measure a candidate after she's hired at the 30, 60, and 90-day level, 90-day interview, because we're comparing all those factors in relationship to real job needs. And when that doesn't work out, it's generally because managers have made the judgment too quickly, or if they didn't make it too quickly, they changed job needs in midstream, or the style of the manager conflicted with the style of the new hire. However, if you address all of the things we've talked about, you can improve the process in real time. In our next segment, we are going to talk about how to write a great ad that attracts the candidate that you really want to see, rather than flooding your inbox with useless resumes. And then we'll take a look at sales assessments and discuss why pre-employment assessments that are personality-based don't tell you what you really need to know. We will also delve into how to read the resume correctly and then how to do a phone screen from that information. So stay tuned. We will be back in touch and look forward